Hello everybody and welcome back to Army Painting Series 18. This is episode 4, and this episode we're really going to dive into those non-metallic metals. Now, obviously, we got to translate this armor onto the horse guys as well. We did that on our color test figure 2, but actually I'm looking at this, I just see some other freehand designs that could find their way onto some of these things. Okay, so that's kind of neat to see right there. When you can see there's some purples in here, we got some sky blues, a lot of reflectivity here. Then you've got some of those purples that are here in the wings. So all that stuff is going to have to happen here. Lots of, well, see, the reflected light's going to be interesting here because we've got this blue tile floor, blue marble floor here. So we'll see just what kind of reflectivity we can get on that. These sword blades are these are pretty darn thick here. We'll see what we can do with those. Maybe we'll do a gold edge here on some of the shields. But clearly, we've got to focus in on, again, these purples. Here we've got almost a little bit of a greenish blue, right? Which means we will either throw in some of our mint green or just have our clear green mixed with our clear blue, which is way the heck back over here. Boom. Something like that. Combine those together. We're also going to have some of our creature caster colors here. We got a pair of fadeds out here. That should be very handy. We also have our usual pair of Reaper off-whites here. We also have blue liner, and we might even see some of the faded purple, right? So we're just going to use sort of the usual things. We'll get these out. Liners over here, and your off-whites will be over there on the palette. We are going to start out, like I said, blocking out some of these middle tone things here. Then we'll work a little bit lighter, then go back into our shadows again. And we'll see what we can do here. Do this as quickly as possible and get all of this metal, including the swords, some gold here on the hilts, get our reflectivity into this thing. And we'll do that once we get some color out on the palette next. Let's dive right in, shall we? And let's get to our, again, those middle tones here. So there's some of our mint green. Also going to have some of our faded ultramarine over here. And just a collection of a little bit of things here. Especially some of our mint green. And none of this is about shading at this point. It's just about placing some of our values. So I got to decide, and I'm thinking this has to be that's got to be where our light is, right? And because we're using some of the clear paints, we can just already start to think about, look at that, see how that's kind of semi-translucent right there? And that is why I do like the Reaper paint. Again, the Creature Caster paint is handy when you want to go sort of in the opposite direction and get some coverage. I know I've mentioned it a couple of times already in this series, there's just never going to be a time where you see me say, well, it's only this and nothing else. Because there is never any one thing that works perfectly. Even, say, if I wanted to do this in true metallic metal in oils, I would have to use the MIG ammo metallic oils because the Winsor Newton metallic oils they're horrible and completely useless. And love me some Winsor Newton paints. My Winsor Newton oils, love them, but the metallic paints, they're awful. They are useless for what we would need them for. And that just, you have to be willing to kind of adopt it. And I think, you know what? That's just going to have to be a boot color right there. That is, the armor does not extend over the boot. And if I just go a little sideways like this here, so we just drop a little bit of lights there. So you can see how subtle that is. And we can start to do this now on the rest of our dull Amaranth Knights. And I think we'll start off here with the infantry first. Now our little trumpet player here, he's a little bit different. just in general, some of the armor here is different on these Forge World. And I think there was 6 of them. I think there was 6 of these guys. And once again, it's taking away a little bit of the paint, and then go into our let's see, which way do we want to go with this? I'm looking at the reference on screen. We'll stick with this side for now, as in the left side where our light's going to come from. Now these items right here, these are way more clearly defined here on our Forge World figures than, say, on our metal ones. Well, so is the chainmail, which is sort of inevitable. Again, I have to remember not to get down in the boots because, well, they're just boots. They don't have that sort of metal shielding on them. And look at this. See, we can just start to position some of our other mid-tones, reflected lights in there. Back to a bit of a helmet right here. And really, I want to emphasize again, with the non-metallic stuff, your big priority is going to be that reflected light, the reflected colors. It's a broken record, yes. I say it over and over again. But I wouldn't say it if it wasn't just so incredibly true. Now, on the inside of this, I was thinking if I went with instead of blue on the interior there, and went with something more of a linen white or whatever, that would have given me an interesting chance for some reflections. However, I just didn't get a chance to paint that in before I glued them to the base. Now, maybe afterwards, a while from now, I said, well, you know what? I have somehow I have found the free time, and I can go in there and maybe make that alteration. So I do it. Why not? It's not the end of the world. The end of the project is not always the end of the project. How many times are we adding on figures anyway to an army? Because rules change, something happens, whatever. They do a whole new system, because I guess one of the major systems is about to go and undergo a big change. We'll just say it's something like Schmorty K. We'll just refer to it as that. And pray tell, there's going to be a whole new version of that. Okay. Again, just got our filbert brush going here. Taking it nice and easy. I think we've got a couple more infantry now. Our banner guy right here, he's got all kinds of nifty armor going on. However, this time, you know what? I'm feeling this. We have done pretty much the lighting all from the other side from that other side over there, but I'm changing it up here. We're gonna make ourselves a change. That's how it goes here in Wappleville. What's interesting though is on this side of his chest plate, I can see the rasterization, these little lines here, because this is obviously 3D printed, it's 3D sculpted, 3D printed, and they made the masters from that. So even on Forge World, I can see that sort of the residue of the printing process. So no matter how big you are, sometimes you can see the issues on stuff. Okay, and that again, not going to get too crazy with everything here. All this is mapping out what goes where. So here's our last of the infantry. Now, it makes sense for this side to get that somewhat lighter sky blue. Then do the reflections on the other side where we've got his shield arm. Work our way down. Now these guys, yeah, I was tempted, who knows? Maybe some of these you'll see these in gold, especially on like a special character or whatever. I haven't determined that yet. And it may not even be that way during the filming part of this. But when it comes down to gameplay, where I've actually not just constructed the army, but actually used it, because there's more than just these guys in the army. There's also, I want to have the Highlander guys, I want to have some of the other heroes, I want to have some of the Rangers. It has nothing to do with are they great or are they terrible. It's just, and in some ways, what I don't want to have happen is the Dole Amaranth is just, well, I want to say blue Easterlings because my Easterlings kind of are blue, but I just more blue Easterlings with swans. That's I don't want them to just be that. So that's part of my rationale, whatever you want to call that. Once again, this is our white shield one here. We'll make that blue. So I might do that on a couple of one or two other ones. I might also try that blue shield, see how that works. Now these are your plastic knights here. So we've got a mix of new resin, well, old plastic, because it's still old. There's no other way around it. It's old. It may not be 2001 old, but it's certainly not 2020 new. Well, not much is 2020 new these days. Now, this especially, like I said, we're going to be working in some of our faded plum, our faded ultramarine, but for right now, I do want to emphasize getting in our sky colors here. It's the thing that I'll build everything else from. And I'm just thinking they have boots on and they do not have the armor over their shoes, which once again I have failed to remember to go look that up and see exactly how that is, what that's called, that bit of armor there. Because clearly I'm going to have to paint that a lot. There's just going to be a lot of armor, and it would be nice to know what those pieces are called. There is definitely gold on the horses. Helmet crest. Let's get our just a little something on those lance tips there, just so I remember. Let's see, we're just moving rapidly through this. And we just got a couple of our horses left, and then we will shift into a somewhat lighter gear here. This is really just wow. I mean, when I look at it compared to the lighter colors, and that's not even a white, again, maybe a value 4. At the very lightest, if 1 is the lightest, this is probably a 4. And it's also, it's not just a somewhat slightly darker color, but it's relatively thin down. And with these darker colors in place, we use the semi-translucency of that color to, it can maybe cut out, even if it just cuts out 1 layer of paint, even if that's all it takes away is just that, to have to do that 1 more layer. Hey, that's 1 less layer you gotta do. 1 less layer you have to do. That either makes the whole project take a little bit less time, or it leaves you more time maybe for some of the fun stuff, some of the basing, some more freehand. Maybe we actually get to do another round of freehand somewhere else, a little more elaborate maybe than we had first envisioned. Because that's generally, that's the calculation that I'm going to make is, okay, if I can save 5 minutes on each guy, as far as just, okay, one extra layer of making something lighter, well, then that's definitely going to be translated into some extra little effect that I can do somewhere. And I think you've seen the dramatic effect that a 5 minute, well, like some of this, right? If you were to take all of the grand total of time I spent on this one guy doing this freehand, I mean, let's say it's 40 minutes. And if I can save 5 minutes on 8 guys, boom, there's the 40 minutes that I need to be able to do that more elaborate kind of brocade of freehand on this guy. So that's, I don't want to get into math, and it almost sounds like we're playing Lord of the Rings right now with a lot of math hammering the painting process, but you want to finish projects and not get bored with them. That sort of math, that's the calculus you will have to make. I think maybe in the last couple of series, I haven't necessarily focused as much on that overall the time frame of things. I believe that I have, especially since, well, we're still working on an oil painting series right now. But if I haven't quite talked about it in maybe in those stark terms, I think we've got ourselves one last horsey here. Well, we'll get into our horse's helmet here. And the idea is if I can block in where all this stuff goes, that's when stuff like the faded plum, the faded ultramarine comes out, we start to add in some of those purples. And then as we start to move our way towards the conclusion, then out comes the blue liner to work darker. And then out comes our progressively lighter colors all the way up to potentially that bold titanium white. And once again, as always, that's the thing that we wait until we are truly ready for it. You just don't want to jump the gun on adding something which is it's the light as you can go. If you go to that right away, especially with these metals right here, then you are just then left with nothing but making something darker, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with making things darker. You want to have room to work both the light and the dark. Okay, I can see we've got that armor there. Let's have some of it here too. What's going on with our horse here? And I think what I might do, I think what I'm going to do is hit the golds at this stage here to just kind of start to introduce those as well instead of going lighter here. Yeah, we'll do that. All right. And that means, I'm going to take a little bit of actually some of this clear orange. Clear orange goes here, and we will mix it with our, right here, with our sepia. Again, thinking along the lines of middle tones, and let's start to think where these golds are going to be clearly there. I'm just going to grab our horse over here. I also want to get a hint of gold in their helmets, but okay, it's that part of the right in here. Now, while I'm thinking about it, let's get that right in here, and then again, I was starting to. I do like the idea of that little bit of gold there. That's a nice bit of separation, I think. We've got the... Anything else with that? Okay, that is that. And we'll again go with the horses first, and then we'll work our way back. Oh, I'm just going to have a little touch of the pale yellow in there to not necessarily lighten it up, but actually make it a little more opaque. Back to our horse and his helmet there. Let's get this. Let's get his horn with just some kind of color on it. What else? We've got this right here. We got the saddle there. And I think that takes care of him. Let's move on to our next horse over here. We don't have to worry about a helmet on our Dol Amroth Knight there. But he's got himself a shield. So we'll hit that. You can see nothing. It's a lot of just blocking in again. I realize we're all the way into episode 4 and there's still some of this very ugly, nasty blocking in and such things. Oh, that's kind of how it goes. We got a lot of complex things happening here. Again, if all of this was we're just going to take a bunch of skeletons and we're just going to paint them bone white and that's it, well, the army painting series would go really fast and there would be very little point to doing them. But here, I think by trying to a challenge, basically, overcome a new challenge with each series, I do think there is value in that. I just had to go back here because I saw somehow forgot to do this part. Part of it is that, well, the casting on that is not super fantabulous, and I didn't even notice that I hadn't hit that part yet. So, okay, that's a little better now. I also see, while I've got it, I'll just tap a couple of these parts here again with our somewhat mid-tone. So in our next stage, what we'll do is we'll take an even lighter version of this and we'll really try and find some of those lights, really try to establish where that's going to be. Might even throw some of the clear yellow out there just to see if we're going to lighten up some of our gold areas too. I might even potentially just throw a little bit of something into the skin tones. Probably just hit that with some blue during the course of the off-camera bit of this. More so just as a little bit of a color reference. So here, see that? The orange keeps that from getting just too brown. And like I said, nothing is terribly fancy here. I'm just moving around saying, okay, what goes where? Oh, we got our saddle over here. Gotta do that too. We'll move all of our cavalry out of the way, and away we go over here. What's happening? Some real clear stuff going on here with these sword hilts. That's going to be an interesting little reflection that'll have to be done. Here we'll most certainly get this edge here with the, like in the gold. Look at that'll be able to reflect down onto his leg there. Let's move on. And the other reason too, I'm showing you this, is we've talked so many times about essentially getting something that is to the point where it is, say, playable. Perfect? No. Playable? Yes. So hopefully by the end of this episode here, we have something that if people saw it on a table, they'd say, "Oh wow, that looks really great. That's all done." Even though we know we've got a whole another episode yet to go after this. But to the masses, so to speak, they wouldn't necessarily view it that way. It's maximizing time, maximizing your effort, but also making it so that you can get these guys out on the table and use them because unplayed armies are unpainted armies. Ooh, that's something I gotta. There you go. That should be a law of Wappleville right there. I do think so. That's more of a law rather than a suggestion, I think. I really think so. Okay, so there's that. Anything else except this guy here? Once again, pop a wee touch of gold here in a couple of spots. And once we get this in place, then we're going to go in with another round of lightning stuff. Then we go in with the darks. And then we start to play in between. That's where we really start to hop in with some of the purples and those sort of off colors. I know it's kind of a weird word to call them, but that's about the best I could come up with. And all right, that takes us to where we need to be. So what we're going to do is we're going more into our Maiden Flash and our Maggot White into some of our blue liner and some more of our mint green over here. So we'll add some of that too, and we'll do that next. Let's get into those lighter colors here. Again, we are going to take some of this mint green here. We'll throw this out on the palette, and once again we have a stopped up container, which is why I absolutely despise these type of jars right here. At least for acrylics, they work fine for oils, but acrylics, thumbs down, big time thumbs down for all of those, because it doesn't matter what the manufacturer is. Now let's get in here with some of our lights. And I'm not worried about any kind of blending either at this stage. I just want to position some lights, and I'm using this guy here because I can use the edge of him like that. I can use the edge of him to do something like this. And this is one of those Cotmans. You've seen me use these before. It's a Winsor Newton brush. However, it's a synthetic, not a sable. So more endurance. Definitely gonna take more punishment than say your sables, but then that's the point. That's the point, is that this once again takes some of that stress and strain off of your Series 7 sable, and therefore you don't destroy that quite so quickly. And therefore also saving you some dollars or whatever the currency is of wherever you reside, which never a bad thing. Never a bad thing. We're going to start to think about that is an awful thick sword right there. That is mighty thick, which, well, with resin, that's kind of what happens. If you wanted to endure, I suppose. You can do the super thin resin sword. It's just not really going to last. Not in the kind of scrums that you get with Lord of the Rings. And those not familiar with the system, it gets tight. It's a little bit packed. Miniature on top of miniature practically. And Lord of the Rings is a game that really dives into terrain. Sometimes quite literally as miniatures fall off the terrain. Not something we want to do a lot of. Look at this. See, I can still go back in here. Look at what I was able to do there. See that nice feathered brush stroke? Now, once again, the nature of that slightly transparent nature of the Reaper paint versus, say, if I was using the Pro Acryls and I've got that real heavy duty opacity going, we will rely on that opacity later on for sure, not just in this episode, but in the next one as well. But look what happens here. This is another thing too. It holds so much paint. The idea is we use a bunch of it here, right? Use a whole bunch of it here where we know we want to do these type of brush strokes and we want that paint to flow smoothly. But then when we wanted to do that nice little faded thing over there, right? Well, we can do that because as we do look at this, nice little gentle brush stroke. And then as we start to remove a little bit of that paint, look what happens here. Look at that. Look at that. Now see, just keep in mind over here on the opposite side of that breastplate, we are going to go in there with most likely blue liner. Maybe even, I don't know, blue liner, a hint of the clear purple, or blue liner, maybe even a little bit of, maybe a touch of the brown liner, maybe a little bit of that. Because again, the blue and brown together, that's going to give you that sort of a grayish, nice, almost a black, almost like a black. Which side do I want this to be? That's also one of the widest blood channels I've ever seen on a sword of this side. It's like immense. I guess he's planning on shedding a whole bunch of orc blood. All right, we're thinking again, our little reflected lights in there. We shall continue. We'll move on. Keep this going. Keep this line moving here. Thinking again, those vertical things. More on the chest plate here. Right there. And as we start to remove some paint from this, mostly by doing our little bit on the sides of things like the swords. And look at this, look at that. That's pretty cool to be able to do that. I mean, yeah, I love me my number 8 rounds, but this is going to let me work a little bit faster here. If I can just get in here with a little more precision than, say, just the number 8. And let's look at this. This is another fun thing look at that fading and feathering. What actually put this brush back into my consciousness was thinking about all the old painting pyramid videos, because I used to use this brush all the time. And then sort of just got away from it. It was replaced by other brushes, and then I started to think about it again, and you know what? I remember really liking those, the number 2, especially the 0 liners like this. Those of you that have watched the Painting Pyramid series, you know that those would begin with the little explanation of the difference between a liner brush and a spotter brush, along with the number 8 rounds. Now, a lot of the same stuff you hear me repeat today. Some things never change. And that quick little just opposite of where the light is on one end, that's where the dark is on the other. I'm going to start to think a little bit about what's light in here, but that, again, that will have more of the purple on it. I think we got this guy with our banner here. Have to remember we have flipped where the lighter portion of the armor is on this guy. Also have to keep in mind that chain of lights that we always want to have. And especially when the arm is raised like that or lowered, it's that much more important to maintain that sort of just a whole line of lights that goes all the way down from the shoulder, sometimes from the head, down the shoulder, all the way down to the end of their arm, sometimes even into the sword blade. Once again, into our chainmail here. It's not a dry brush because there's plenty of paint in this brush. It's just how subtle we are being with that brush stroke. That's what creates that. And like here, see where I got the big old blob. All of a sudden, now we're just kind of. It's sort of like we're doing the oils. This is why I say there's really not, in some ways, not the big difference between acrylics and oils. Where some folk they just want those to be two entirely separate mediums that have nothing to do with each other and everything is different. Well, no, everything is really not different. There's much more that is similar than what is different. Yeah, got to think about a reflected light there. We're gonna have to get some, not necessarily a lance, but oh, I hit that. Boy, that is just, I still can't get over just how wide these swords are. These are pretty darn thick swords. And I find just the last of the armor pieces is already starting to think about some of those reflected lights, reflected colors, reflected whatever onto the last of our infantry here. And then we have to do something like this too with our golds, and we'll just throw the clear yellow out there. And that should definitely do it. What I think I will do is after we, depending on how much time here, after we hit this with our sort of bluish white, then I will dive in just on some of the head crests with some of that more purple-ish type color that we wanted there. Again, it'll depend on what's available time-wise, because I still got there's the 4 cavalry, and I think they're going to take up a wee chunk of time. I really think they'll take up a wee chunk of time, so most likely, I think what we'll do is we'll save the next segment then specifically for things like the wings, stuff like getting into our golds on the shields and helmets and everything else. And I might even, and that depending on how that time frame is, maybe just throw the slightest bit of skin tone in some areas too, because I don't want to have to be messing around with that with metals painted and have to be working around that. Now we've got enough of the paint removed out of our brush to see that it lets me get in there and just fade. It's almost like it's oil paint. It's not like we're moving wet paint around. That is not wet into wet blending. That is just merely we're fading the paint. We're just taking that brush stroke. It's a nice faded brush stroke, but not dry brushing. I think that's maybe, that is another thing that'll happen, I think, with practice. As you get used to it, it's certainly not any kind of brush stroke that GW teaches or most of those kind of things do. They just teach you it gets slathered on equally. Every brush stroke has the same amount of pressure to it. Even the glazes just get slathered on. And this is kind of well, we slather on the paint sometimes too. I mean, for sure. We definitely started out that way. But at a certain point, then you start to get a little more control in those brush strokes. just a bit more control. Now let's see what Mr. Horse is going to have out here on the wings of his helmet. This side didn't really manage to get any on there at all. No big deal because it's semi-translucent. We're even letting some of the original dark still show through. Oh, what else happens here? Back of that helmet, we've got chainmail going on. And nothing says that, well, gee, we can't glaze over that. But that's just there. It has to stay there. No, I can glaze over that, make some changes to it. Certainly not a problem. Let's see. Oh, yeah, we never really got to his chest plate here. Well, we'll try to rectify that here. The other reason I'm using this is because it's a little easier to get into some of these hard to reach areas than it is, say, with the number 8 round craft brush. Again, we love the number 8 round craft brush. Going to use it all the time as much as possible. But when it does come down to making something easier, if it's easier to use this, well, guess what? I'm going to use it. I really don't care about, well, no, I have to do this. I've got to use this tool. It's supposed to always be used here. No, it doesn't really, not for me, it doesn't work that way. If I need to change up something, even something that I normally do all the time, well, then that change just happens. I think that's that. We just got a couple of more horsies here. Couple of more horsies. In fact, I might even do that. Just here with the time we've got left, I might even just go in here and throw a little bit of skin tone on these guys just to flesh that out a little bit. Pun intended. And then what we can do, like I said, the next segment after this, that's when we're going to, I think, dive into some of those purples, wherever we see things like those, the wings and the crests, and start to get some lights into our golds as well. That makes sense to do that. What's happening back here? Last horse. I mean, it's not like there's a whole ton of skin tone to worry about, so that's not going to take super long. How's about some, yeah, a couple of brush strokes in here. This is the nifty thing about it. See, I can reach way in there. You see, it's not deforming at all. It really keeps this shape. And that's something that a natural hair bristle, it's not really designed to do. It doesn't really hold its shape. It's going to deform a bit because it is supposed to be softer. But I think even now at this early stage, we start to see a big old difference here in our metals. And this is 4 cavalry and 5 infantry. Yeah, this is, it's a little bit going on here. And you can see how we've really been able to, in not a whole lot of time, start to really have some definition here on these metals, even with this little bit of effort. Yeah, this is why we sort of get these things on the table faster, because faster you get that army painted, the faster you're going to play with it. and you'll be more inclined, well, at least you hope so, because there's been times where I've played armies where I went, oof, wow, that was a total mistake to ever even think about these guys, which is sad given how much time and energy I've spent just in the planning of the theme and other such things. So, whatever. Sometimes life doesn't quite go according to plan. So, what we got here, a bit of our maiden flesh, some of this, some of this. Let's see what kind of a. I'm not going to bother putting any red out on the palette just yet. I'm just going to use the little touch of that purple as my red. Remember, color goes everywhere, so it's going to go everywhere. I'm already starting to think about some of that purple over here on some of the head crests like this. Now, where's my... Yeah, this one here going to have a little bit more of the skin tone working. We're still going to put it, especially on this guy here, we'll get some of that green in there. We'll get some brighter tones in, but that has nothing on there except just the original, quite literally the original brown glaze. And somehow that side of the horse didn't quite get some of his brows. So you can see I'm just kind of absent-mindedly starting to throw purple into some areas here. That is your faded plum right there. I know that's not a real super common skin tone. It's not really meant to necessarily be a skin tone. I'll also have to figure out for sure if we're going to have gloves on these guys, what's going to be happening there. But what the heck, while I'm here, I'm starting to get some of those initial little shots of the faded plum there too. See, that's definitely gloves, so I think we won't do any more skin on the hands. I think that was the trumpet guy. We did that on him because I'm thinking it's a little hard to play a horn or trumpet with gloves on. I'm just saying. Just throwing that out there. Back into our infantry. Yep, definitely. I'm seeing the gloves there, so. Yeah, nice thing what this lets me do, it really lets me kind of sneak in there. Like in here. Because it's a nice tight squeeze. But yeah, that brush gets in there and has that. It's stiff enough to maintain its shape as I do that sort of thing. Let's go out this way. We just got a couple more inventory here to do. And then what we'll do is we'll get some of that clear, we'll get some clear yellow out on the palette there. We'll start to mess around with some of our golds again. We'll start to get into our head crest here with some of the purple. We can't forget our shoulder, the wings on the shoulders as well, because those also had some of that. I mean, I'm describing it as purple, but it's really not purple. We'll also do some darker glazes in this, although while that looks very light there, it's really not as light as you think it is. Because look at how dark that is next to that light here. I'm just going to grab a little, boom. Look at how you can see how much darker that is. It's like a value 5. That's barely even in the middle. But that's how nice it is to have those deeper tones built up already. I don't have to say though, the Forge World guys, what faces there are do have more expression than the plastics. I mean, the plastics have, yeah, there's faces on them, but that's about the extent of it. And you can't really go much beyond, like, okay, they have a face. There's vaguely a nose and some eyes, it looks like, and maybe a mouth. But again, look at that. We're just taking the brush and just kind of dancing it right over the top of that. I think we'll do, yeah, we've got our, get the trumpet again. Nah, he still has gloves on too. Okay, well, apparently playing the trumpet with gloves, not as hard as I thought. Maybe not that big of a deal. Getting the wings there. Can pop some onto his face. Much more is going to happen. Look at, see the difference that some of the, even here, sneaking at some of that purple right there on his armor. Last time around here, just to, again, putting something on the skin tone just to say, just to show there's something there. And now in our next step, what we're going to do, let's develop a little bit of our reflected light on that sword too. What the heck? And you will see more of these shoulder things. You will see certainly more of the wings. Potentially even a little more on the faces, but definitely the gold, the wings, head crests. That's what you're going to see when we come back to this next. Let's go back into this for some of those golds that we talked about, and also the purple, that sort of thing. I'm also going to let a little bit of that, just a touch of that proacryl pale yellow in there. And this is, in some ways, this is more like what we did the step before, adding the somewhat lighter kind of sky blues into that area. As always, there's gonna be some shading over this too, but for now we are gonna, I'm just looking at my, this here. That's what we got these guys for. Start to think about our swan here. Start to think about some lights there. And also on the swans here on the shoulder, it wasn't all just the purple. There was actually some gold that found its way in there. And at this point right now, it's really just kind of looks like a lighter yellow. And that's the idea of that, is to also give us a little more than just, if they were all just purple, well, yeah, that would look a little, I don't know about that. Look at these quick little, look at those rapid little brush strokes right there. That is it's kind of the marvel of these. Again, it's the 0, that is the Winsor Newton. Now, you can do this too if you have, say, a much more pristine version of the craft brushes too. That will work. But at the moment, I'm kind of having fun with this brush. I just like this notion that I can sort of really get into some of these tighter areas here. A little bit easier, a little more carefree. Also gonna hit the bottom edge of that horn. Let's see what we've got. Yeah, we've got, now this looks like the bottom edge of the sword blade, just, or sword hilt, kind of broke off there. Not really surprised, being resin. Might not have ever even been cast there in the first place. Once again, we will. Now here I also have to think about what's next to this. Am I going to have to try and reflect as much of that banner as possible? So maybe that doesn't get too much lighter there. Potentially there is, you could say there was a gold-ish trim on the helmets there. That is something that's on the Forge World ones that is not on. You don't find that on the plastic versions, or especially on the wool metal versions. And I don't think I have any of the old metal infantry. Well, there's a couple of those, but those are sort of my supplemental guys that I will be painting after the fact here. Well, like I said, in some ways, those just really repeat what is here. And if I'm only just repeating the same figures over and over again, I mean, if I was to do maybe if it was something like a goblin army, it's a Moria goblin army, whatever, and you want to say, well, how would you deal with that many goblins? Well, that kind of makes sense. It makes sense to then have a whole bunch of the same guy to show you maybe how to knock those out faster, some way, or at least not to lose your mind doing it. Because sanity during these projects can be a bit of a challenge, especially when it involves hundreds of goblins. Now, I haven't done goblin armies. I have done goblin Blood Bowl teams, and more than one of them too. At some point, I will still reprise my Mimes of Moria, the ultimate Blood Bowl team. That was the first time I ever really did any kind of conversions at all, and that was a big learning experience. Yeah, no, I have not forgotten the Rohan conversions either. Definitely want to do those. Okay. Again, so we're combining some of what we're doing with the wings, and this one I'm gonna let that back be more purple. Less with the golds there. Again, the idea, make as many of these just as different as possible. Now here, these shields, they don't have the rivets on them. Noticing that difference. And I will get into the shoulder crest here. Some of the feathers in the head crest here. And I definitely don't see, we don't have the difference in the trim, so to speak, on the helms that I saw on the Forge World guys. It's not surprising. I mean, it's supposed to be resin. Resin's supposed to let you have more detail. I mean, it does sometimes, not always though. Not always. And I realize that's a sidetrack sort of conversation there, but it does matter because I have also seen, and I know it would happen for me too in my own army painting projects, if the casts are really horrible, no matter how much you're looking forward to that army, just, the Tomb, I keep thinking of the Tomb King stuff and some of the Lord of the Rings figures where I've been a wee bit disappointed in the quality of the casting. There's other figures too. It's not just, GW stuff or whatever, not trying to single them out. I've seen it across many manufacturers, and in fact, darn near all of them. There's just been times where I said, man, I really expected more out from this. And that it can have a negative impact on the enjoyment of the army. So maybe that's another thing you start to think about. You say, maybe you want to look more closely at the figures yourself, because in this day and age of everything being these digital render type things, those can mask, again, not trying to be harsh, but those digital renders can mask a host of issues. You can end up with something, you think you're getting one thing, and what you really get is something else entirely, because you can make any render look amazing, and then there's the casting part of it, and then it can suddenly become less amazing. as we get more of our golds in here. Yeah, we have focused a little bit more on the gold. We're going to get into our purples, I promise. You can see how we move this fast. We move this fast. Don't let myself get bogged down, and we have nowhere near the lightest lights here. It might look lighter, but once again, that has as much to do with establishing our darks as well as we can as anything else. Now, I do have to say, at least I'm seeing now, I'm like, why has the trumpet got the flat thing there? But on the Forge World one, it has a little bit, it's deeper in there. They did get sort of close here with the trumpet on both the Forge World figure and then the old plastic. So you have to give kudos where the kudos are due. Okay, what is happening here? I have to think what I want to do with the rain. I think I'm just gonna go with that sort of a burnt sienna. I mean, yes, it's not the most spectacularly interesting color for the rains. However, it's a nice little, it'll make those blues actually stand out a little bit more just by virtue of having that nice orangey red, and it's going to actually kind of tie in with some of the golds that are here. So it's a way of, in some ways, having gold where there really is no gold, if that makes any sense. Yeah, just let's hit something a little bit there, and I think we got one last horse to do. And I'm going to go one more step with the gold here, because then after that I will actually be almost knocking it down a bit. We'll do a little bit of our shading on that. That'll probably be, especially with this, maybe the orange and purple, orange and clear purple mix, maybe the orange and sepia. Okay. Let's get this other kind of shoulder there. Uh-huh. I see we've got absolutely nothing here. Go back into this. And now, this is where we're going to go into our, we got the yellow here with our, I think, is that not pale? That's pale yellow, I do believe. We'll go right back in here. We're going to get the top of our, boom, swan's head there. Like I said, the idea is that potentially at the end of this here, that this fourth episode, you would have something where you could be okay with taking these guys off of our little containers here, our dead paint containers, and at least playing a practice game with them, if anything else. Now that is, you talk about the whole notion of painting the whole figure at once, which doesn't give you that, well, painted face. Okay, you don't have the face done or some part of it completely done. But this is where having a whole bunch of a little bit finished, kind of, you feel like you're really now making progress instead of, okay, I've got this one part of everything done and nothing on all the rest of it. That can sap your morale just a wee bit, just a teensy bit. However, if you see there's a little bit of progress everywhere, it just gets a little less daunting. Trust me, it does. Take it from the person who paints a whole bunch of armies. Now, again, for you, it's more about fun. See, we even got some green transitions that are happening in there. We haven't even gone in there with any of our darks or anything like that. And really, in no time at all, you could see there's a lot of guys here. We got the horses, so much different things to worry about, and yet we are still banging along with our progress here. Now we're already down into our infantry. Once again, just thinking of a couple of these spaces here where we got some of this light and we got their swords here. Moving on here, again, more shields. Look at the difference, and that's still not the brightest highlight. We can go lighter than that. Oh yeah, there's definitely more light that we could put in there if we wanted. All part of the plan to leave ourselves as much of that wriggle room as possible. Yeah, the word's not happening tonight. Can't do the words. And once again, a little touch of the lighter yellow here. Not really gonna worry so much about this. That is that 5th episode. It's gonna really go back into stuff like the freehand for sure. We're gonna really get back into that. Oh yeah, let's just throw a light over the top of that here. Got what's left of his sword hilt there. And our last dude here, and then we dive into some of our purples here. As you do. Okay. Now we've got Maiden, Flash, and some of that faded plum. We'll play around with this here. Make a few different, some of it a little bit lighter here. Now on this side, I've basically had to draw in the feathers. There's no sculpting of them here, so we will draw those in. We'll also reinforce those with some darks, but now I also have to give the impression here of those on the helmet. I hope you can see. Yeah, I think you can see that. It's all about just giving the impression they are there for right now. We're also going to take some of this purple here. We'll get it in on our sword blade, and I'm just I see it. I want to play with it. I want to have it into my other metals already. I can throw a little bit of that into, again, look at this. Some of these other metals here. It really can be fun instead of scary. The more you're willing to just kind of play around, experiment with your metal colors, you'll be surprised what you can do. You know, look at that. Just what the heck. Even here on the freehand, so many other areas that we can use it. But for now, we want to kind of stick with our head crests here. Once again, this is where we can define. There's just no it just kind of ends here magically. So we're basically creating feathers where there is no feathers. Just gonna draw these in, and this is once again not our lightest light. Remember, we're save those lightest lights, which is why our reflections here won't be lighter than our lightest light. We certainly don't want that to happen. Let's get the tops of those here. We'll work in some of our purple there. So I could just kind of sneak it in real quick here, even on some of the chainmail, whatever. And let's certainly work some of that into our calf here. Can you? No, it's gonna be hard for you to see. Now these plastic ones here, they really need some. I was doing the forge rolled ones, and then I go to the plastic one. I'm like, oh, okay, not quite as much definition there. So again, look into. Can you see that? I think you can. Just gonna try and draw these in. Now these you can't really see, so I'm not gonna get too involved with that. That banner is just a wee bit in the way. See if we can't, yeah, get a little bit of our purple into the shoulders there. A little more here. Another one of our cavalry here. Especially on the tops of that. Let's work away a little bit of the, again, some of that purple into right on the back of the wings here. I think there was some mold lines that had to be scraped away there, and that also helped to kind of dissolve that texture a little bit that was there, if there was any. Once again, we will try and simulate the individual wings there. Going to hit these right there. See, there's the swan's head. That's got a little more purple into it. Even some of our armor here on the horse, because we did that on our test figure as well. We definitely did that. A little more here. Oh, yeah, let's get our other cavalry guy right here. And you can see how much darker that is than just one of our off-whites. So like I said, we leave ourselves plenty of space to go in terms of our highlights. So we had the gold there. Now we start to work in some of that purple. You know, take some of the paint away. Get a couple more of the sweep of the wings here. And this is the part where we have to really draw in texture again. That's just not there. And then that lets me do some of the nifty little reflection things here that you can't see because they're kind of blocked. I also have to remember to hit the blue on that little ship right there. Again, it's nothing that's special. I just need to see it. I need to be able to see that right there. And so that's our last guy here with this phase. So what we will do next, we're going to start working backwards here. We're going to go retrograde a little bit. We're actually going to start to add in some darks. That's where we're going to take in some of the blue liner and maybe even some maybe brown liner or whatever in some of the areas that are supposed to be gold. We will do that. And then after that, we'll get into our, that's when we start to dive into our latest light. After we've established all kind of the mid-tones, semi-mid-tones, then what we'll do, we'll hit those darks and we'll be all set. Primed and ready to throw in some of those brighter highlights. All right, there we go. Now it's about a bit more of that purple in those areas. All right, so we are good to go. All set. So the next thing we're going to do is, like I said, we're going to take some of that darkest dark and we're going to put that in some of these areas. And then maybe even develop some of the skin tone. By the way, the dark there and maybe even some of our little straps here, just get some kind of a sienna type color there. And we're going to do that next. As we move on along here, I'm just going to throw a little bit of this burnt sienna out here. I could just take the orange and some of the red liner. I think I do the same thing, but I'm just going to play with this. I'm going to actually, yeah, that's kind of a fun thing. That's the clear purple and our burnt sienna next to it. Look at that. And if I have a little bit of the, yeah, a little bit of blue liner right there, that's a nice, fun, rich brown, reddish brown there. It's also another dark that I would not mind having in some of the golds as well, which is why we're kind of throwing that around. And also don't mind having it as maybe a bit of a glaze. Faces, no problem. Let's get some of this back in on our shields here. Just a little indication there. I will go back in later. I really can't see much of that. The lights are just turned down so much. I literally can't see anything. I am going to start to think about things like their shoes / boots as well. Maybe even think about a few little hits on the armor. Again, also was thinking about this as a shadow type thing for our golds. Even in here. And even in here. Can you see that? I think so. So again, we keep that line. Just keep that line moving. The addition of a little bit of the purple into this, the clear purple's gonna give me a bit of that translucency that maybe the burnt sienna wouldn't have all by itself. All right, so that is, yeah, let's change that to his glove. That is not supposed to be armor there. And while this is, it's not a crucial thing, just having that little bit of the reddish brown there, it's something that I can use as again, a balance, an indicator I just didn't have before. Oh yeah, now I'm really starting to see I'm so glad that I didn't waste time trying to put some kind of crazy, almost like a boot type texture on there, because it shouldn't be there. That's got actually a little bit even more of the blue liner, but just a little bit of a glaze there, maybe a little bit glaze in here, glaze back there, glaze everywhere. And even while I'm here, while I'm thinking about it, just Use my hand to wipe some of that away. It's a way to keep that line moving. Still got to put the blue over there. Now let's see what we got going on here. For the reins, yeah, just even having that little bit there for the reins, that does make a difference. We also have the stirrups here. Glove. There's just, with stuff like this is, now you know how that the time can start to stack up in a just kind of sneaky on you. You don't really expect it to, and next thing you know, you spend a whole lot of time on just stuff like reins, scabbards. I mean, not tons and tons of time, but it's something. All these belts and everything. That's all additional time. And here, I'm really going to have to draw these in, because on that side, I think I just had to, well, there's not a whole bunch of texture to start with. That's for sure. And a quick little glaze, what that does is brings out something I can always go back in, like I said, with my lighter colors. Do some more. Some more of our infantry here. Now about some of that. Because what I'd like to have is, okay, things like this here, where I'm going to have to maybe do a little bit more of the lighting on the browns here, on the gloves, that those sort of surfaces. That's the kind of stuff I'd prefer to really save for that 5th episode, for our final one, where it becomes more of a highlighting finish work on freehand. Now, does it always work out that it's neatly compartmentalized? For me, almost never. And just never really quite works out that way, that it's all so neatly compartmentalized. I know other people, they want, well, I've got to have this stage. This clearly defined stage, must have it. That's not quite how it works for me. All right. Let's get some darks in here, especially like here. See this on the right there on that part of the sword hilt, and then we'll touch there. Then the glove here. That's all going to make a big difference. All of a sudden, in some ways, the blue starts to look a little bit more blue. Here we'll get a definite, it's sort of like a mini sky earth that we just did there, maybe. Again, hitting some of these. Boy, those are thin. Those are pretty darn thin, I have to say that much. We are going to do a quick little, again, glaze on his face there. I think that's another thing that we will also save for episode 5, is getting the faces painted. Because we don't want to just ignore those. I want to do some decent, like here. Okay, we'll grab this guy here that, see, we can throw this glaze over him here. He's a little bit less deathly purple now. And then we can go back into that with some of our skin tones as well. Back to doing some things like scabbards and shoes and stirrups. That certainly makes much more sense now. Oh, and lances and gloves. And see if I add a little bit more of the blue to that. That's the blue liner. Sort of changes our brown just a touch. I'll even let some of that get on the horse's head too. Not that the horse's head will be that final brown. Yeah, those will be some of the other things that we mess around with. Some of our horses too. While I'm thinking about it, I will just remind myself to do a little bit of brown on that horse there. It's just, again, a quick indication of it. Now we will once again kind of, yeah, it's about adding darks into our metals here too. Which we're doing here. Some of our golds, is it super neat and nice? Well, no, because, well, we haven't really highlighted anything yet either. Really haven't highlighted anything yet. Another scabbard here. Another belt loop here. So I can see on the plastic ones, no wood texture on the back of the shield, but on the Forge World ones, we have texture on the back of the shield. This is another like, see right here on the sword, we just almost sort of cut that in half. And like right here, see, I can use this, and this is before we've even gone in with our light. We can already see way more definition here in each of those feathers on his wings. Our gold here. Oh, yep, we gotta get our belt over here. So this is another, yes, this is called the non-metallic metals episode, but we have to get some of this other stuff too. It's all about context, and if I don't, without this sort of reddish brown here, boy, I'm really lost. Yeah, I would really have been struggling with the comparison to that. So definitely glad I did that. All right, so here's going to be our last thing of our adding our browns, because I want to have time to get in some of those really deep, dark blues, especially the blue liner, especially that. That's going to be important. Now, like I said, I could have used some of the sepia liner here, mix it with that, and then throw in maybe a little bit of the red too. Could have done that. But now back to our, we know he needs a glove there. That's a little better. Some also darks on our golds here. I'm just going to take that and blam right over the top, and then take some of that away. Same thing here. All right, good enough. Now let's go in with some of that blue liner here. There's a bunch of our blue liner. And especially on stuff like here, we We need that bit of definition. Now we're not going to just do everything in shadow here. We're starting to even. This is where we kind of carve out with our brush. It's not black lining or anything like that. We're just bringing out a few little details here. See, we'll get our blood groove here. Boom. Do that on this side of the sword really quickly. So here on the knee armor there, because what that does is it makes some of our reflected light start to stand out just a touch as well. And depending on how much we want to bring out, even see these darker parts here of the head crest, we can do that too. We can add some darks into here. This is where we almost give it a bit of a horizon line. Because remember, the next thing we want to do after this is go in with kind of those middle tone type thing. That's where we do some of the faded ultramarine and some of the faded plum. In fact, we may not even do those brightest highlights in this episode here, because I also have to get back into the freehand and some other things, so you may not. Look at that. See the difference that makes there? Once again, here we're thinking about sort of creating a bit of a horizon line here, so I can take some of that away, add some of it back in, get a little bit of more of a solid resolution there in the armor pieces again, because it's one of these plastic sculpts and sometimes the detail gets a little bit wonky and we just have to assist it a little bit along the way. And you can see how on the horse's helmet here, bring out a little bit more of our shape. Now, what do we got here? Some more of our infantry. And I think this one will right away. Look at the difference just that makes there. We'll also work in some of it right in here too. Again, almost thinking along the lines of the sky-earth type effect. Get into that groove again. We'll get over right over the knee here. Now I can see, look at this, I can go back here. I'm going to grab this brush. Let's get a little blue liner in there and darken down our brown. So it's a little darker brown. Not every boot has to be exactly the same shade of reddish brown. These can maybe just be a completely different shade. He's got different shoes. He's been walking on different stuff. It happens. It can happen. Well, we can reinforce these over here like we did on some of the other ones. Reinforce some of these lines. But we don't want it to become like we're using a pen or something and we're just sort of carving, what am I trying to say here? We don't want to make it look artificial. We want it to be as natural as possible. This one really is going to make a difference here. That's for sure. Look at this. Look at that. That's really big old difference there. So see, that's another reason why I wanted to do this before I just jump in there and add those brightest lights. Because if I had done that, I wouldn't have realized, yeah, we need some serious dark there. Just like here on the trumpet and on our sword here. Same thing. To get that side of it, we'll just use our finger and blend that in. I can even do a little touch of a glaze right there. And if I'm worried about this becoming too much of just a dark blue, well, I could throw in some of the clear purple into that. Here, look at this. We'll get the side of his knee right there, so that when we do hit this with those really light colors, it really does have that poof, that impact that you want. See here, we're gonna try and impose a little bit of a horizon line on that, like we've done on some of the other ones there. But see how it's broken up? Have to let that be broken up. Now let's do this one here. We've got some stuff we want to write in here on this side. Then on the other side, yes, you can see it. We'll hit this on the apex of that. I also want to get some of my purple down in there. So like I said, there will be more to do on this mode. It's not going to be completely done, just like we didn't complete the freehand completely in the so-called freehand episode. Freehand's not done, but we got it to a certain stage, just like we're getting the metals to a certain stage. And again, look at I need to add some kind of brown here for the boots. Whatever, not gonna get crazy about it. Gonna get some more definition here on his helmet for sure. There we are. Boy, those are, yeah, must have been some mold lines there that I had to get in there and really wipe away. Here, we gotta get the underside of this. We'll wipe some of that away. And this is another area where the so-called details get a little bit wonky. Like here, that actually all has to be lighter. So while I'm thinking about it here, I just realized that, yeah, that's not just stirrups and stuff. There's actually need to be some kind of, boom, right there. A couple of brush strokes gets it all back in order. Back to our blue liner here. Again, just settling on a few edges here. Maybe even like a little bit of a dark right there. Now what I'm doing is it's a little bit like this. See what's happened on this guy here? Same thing, even on the side where it is lighter. We're also thinking about, again, the reflected light behind that. So much more to these things. Okay. I'm going to, while I've got it here, I just see that this one didn't got in other places, but not there. Gotta be willing to make those changes. I think this is our last one that we got here. Get that a dark edge. We'll get some of this into the groove here. Start to separate that from the face. Let's get our dark over there. Again, some separation here. And some separation here on the wings here on the back of his head crest. There we go. Now, like I said, none of this stuff is going to look to you like it's finished or anything, and it really shouldn't. That's not what it's about. Remember, still not even finished with this video yet, much less the next one. And speaking of the next one, we're going to move on to our next stage here. That's where we want to get some of the purples and other such things into these midtones, because we've gone now to our really deepest dark on this. Now we want to start heading back towards the light. We shall head towards the light here. There we go. Then we will do that next. It's going to be time for some of our midtones in here. More of our reflected light, and I think we might even begin to place some of those brightest highlights. We did throw out some of the bold titanium white here. Now, whether we get to that in this segment or in the next one, we'll see. You never quite know. Never quite know. But what we want to do is start to, even maybe in some of the faces, on the sword blades, all those different areas. So let's dig out our... Just want to make sure I've got the right brush here. Now again, you know, with this sort of a thing, when you're working on units, sometimes you have to backtrack a little bit. And we've done that more than once on this project. We've done it on other ones. I know a lot of people, they want to do it till it's done, right? That they, by golly, I'm going to get this one part done by the end of the day. And sometimes when you force things, that's when it stops getting fun too. I think that a little bit of flexibility. Now let's see what we get when we make our look at that. That's very nice. That's their faded ultramarine, and as we smash into that camera, faded ultramarine, a little bit of our blue liner as well. You can see, like, right under here, there is no reflected light at all. Let's get some of that right in here too. Again, another area. In all of the haste to do everything else, somehow that was just sort of left behind. See, even that starts to become more of a middle tone. Then we'll get some of our maiden flesh work in here. Not, that's maggot white, sorry, with some of our seafoam green. I'd start to think about the edges of sword blades a little bit. Again, this is not the, as you would call it, that final highlight. Because look here, we'll pop a little bit of this Pro Curl White, and you can see just how far it is. Look at that. I made it big enough so you could say that is white. That is just how much space we've left ourselves here to work in, which is always a good plan. And I'm going to use that same little thing right there to pick up some of those. Look at how the chainmail now starts to get a little bit brighter, but we need to start to smooth some of these things out. Let's get some of our faded plum in here. Mix it with a little bit of our other color here, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to find some of these mid-tones in these areas. There's a lot of blue. Got tons of that blue. What we don't have is, well, all these other fun colors that are pretty essential for making these things look more daylight lit as opposed to just maybe sitting there on the wall of a museum or whatever. Here, let's again just a couple of these brighter edges. Now on the Forge World ones, I can see that there's more, see a little bit of a trim that's on the edge of the armor there. That is just more prevalent on these guys than, especially on the metal ones, even the plastic ones too. Take some of the other reason I wanted the white out is so that the ultramarine, well, basically it's very much like an ultramarine blue color, the clear blue. So if you're wondering why I keep smashing into the palette camera, that's because everything had to be moved back after a long weekend of broadcasting the painting of gigantic busts. So if I smash into things, that's just me trying to get used to where things are again and probably not back in the exact same place they used to be. As a matter of fact, I know that palette cam is not where it used to be. It is most definitely in a different spot. It is the hazards of filming. See what I just added there? That was some of our, and that starts to make this a little bit more of a gradual thing and less of a stark transition. We're gonna bring it just a little bit more, but now blue liner comes in here because it's just a bit more of a neutral. It's still got some blue in it, but you can see there's also enough of our gray in there to make that more neutral. Now we've got our dark over here. We're going to take some of that blue liner. We're going to mix it with that faded plum that's over here. Now we start to soften that down a little bit. I guess I do believe, I know I've mentioned it before, that was sketching or something like that. That's sort of the in vogue term for that sort of a action right there, where you sort of take the highlights, you really block them in, and then you come back in later with to smooth it out. See, like we're doing here. Look at, we're also gonna generate a few of these, because think of it, we gotta sort of reflect that his arm and the little banner that's hanging off of the trumpet there. Not reflect it as in, say, like a mountain on a lake or whatever in a landscape. Just something to suggest maybe there's a little bit of a shadow being cast on it. That's why we're going to go here to our clear blue for these guys that are basically here underneath where the banner is, right? Makes sense. Start to think about some more lights over here. And again, going back into my maggot white to say no secondary reflection over that. That is, and look at this. Okay, that's a nice open space. It's a nice open space. Let's not squander that nice open space right there. Now you can see that I'm not just, okay, throw a little bit of purple on one guy, then move into the next guy. It's a little bit different maybe than what you've seen me do at other points in the project here, but sometimes you're better off just to keep going on this one guy and just get him to the point where, okay, that's it. We've completed all of the medals on him, as opposed to just the straight up assembly line. And I always advocate assembly line type stuff, but there are times where it makes sense to not do that. And that right now, that's how I'm feeling about this. I would rather get a feel for how some of the shading is working on this and just complete it, rather than say, well, no, I have to just do a little bit of purple here and move on to the next one. I think that happens much more with things that are along this line here with an awful lot of the non-metallic going on. I think we did that with the Mountains Men too. Now that was, of course, with oils. That's also the advantage of the oils that you can, here that this is already everything we've already done before. This is dry, so I'm just smoothing that out there, finding these little. Look at that. Actually, you have this wide open area here. Why not take advantage of that? I also see we've got a buckle there. I want to make sure I get the top of that surface. And I'm thinking about a few brighter areas here. Same thing. Now, got to start moving this down here. Again, that is the maggot white. It's mixed with some of that mint green. It's a nice turquoise. If you don't have it, really the clear blue and clear green mixed together could get you the same thing, at least a close enough to it. Obviously more blue than the green. Even though the name is mint green, there's actually more blue to it than there is green. And then hopefully that hasn't confused you too much. And sometimes, well, okay, a brushstroke goes awry and we just clean it up, fix it, no big deal. Not a big deal. Now, what side? Also, with the sword hilts here, we want to get those two. And there's our edge there. We'll also have to make sure that we get a decent edge onto our gold up there. That's our pale yellow there. That's the Pro Acryl. Get a couple of our lighter metal colors into here too. Also going to think about some reflected light now. That's going to be I'm going to say faded ultramarine mix with some of our clear blue there. Back to some blue liner here. Where I'll get looking for things that sort of resemble a horizon line. But then over here, remember our little infinity mirror type thing? We've got to reflect armor onto armor. And we'll do that there. We're going to do it over here. We leave a little bit of dark right over there. We'll do that also on this shoulder here and here. Going to get some of that not faded, the pale yellow right there on the shoulder. Boy, now you know me. I've talked about these sculpted on freehand things. This boat here, the features on his face are not sculpted as heavily as the. So in between segments, I'm gonna be moving that camera because that is definitely becoming more than just a little irritating. While I've got this here, I'm gonna take a little bit of this. We're gonna just get a lighter skin tone, I think, going here on him. Something that's maybe a little less, got a little less of the purple in it. There we go. And we'll take some of our green and we'll drop that over the top of this as well to make sure that it's got that, a little bit of 5 o'clock shadow. Yeah, I know. It's a very commonly done thing. It seems every guy has to look like he hasn't shaved in weeks. And we can, let's just play with that. We got a little bit of our green here. It's a touch of our skin tone there, and just a touch of greenish gray there. So let's not get stuck on just one of these guys here. Let's do banner guy. Let's get Mr. Banner guy. You know what? I'm going to actually begin here. It seems like it's kind of helpful to actually set that brightest light. Now we also have helmets to deal with this time around. Also got some helmets to deal with. Now that, I mean, again, I could use the yellow, but I kind of like the idea of this. Let's see if we can get some of the faded plum mixed with the pale yellow. And right here on those swan wings, same thing over here. Again, that's practically in the dark. I can barely see what the heck I'm doing there. But then, look at that, so sneak a little bit of that purple even into some of the dark areas there. We're going to sneak some of it into here. Oh, we're going to get some of it onto our... So I told you there was going to be purple in this. Sometimes I lie, sometimes I don't. Well, let's work some of it into here as well. And then we will, there's our maggot white and mint green mixture. Gonna get just like we did on the other one, there's a little bit of a reflection. Why? Because maybe it's reflecting his arm here. Maybe it's reflecting, oh, I don't know, this sword that's sitting right here. And that's why it's got that almost the same angle as the sword here. It does kind of make sense that it would be there. We will get a touch of our lightest light towards the end of the sword blade then. Of course, right here. When the sword's at this angle, it's always so much easier to just say, okay, yeah, that's where that needs to be. Here, let's get some of this on his elbow now. However, still thinking about, boy, that's even in shadow for you, much less for me. How's about a bit more of our lighter tone here on his elbow. And it's not just about adding lighter and lighter colors. We also have to be willing to go back with our blue liner and do a similar sort of thing. Let's pick up some of his chainmail here. Now back to that very light purple there again for our swan wings. Oh, I'm going to go another round on that, I think. Yep, I was taking a peek at one of my color tests there, and I thought, yeah, we went fairly light on. I want to get right here. Look at this. Look at that. That's just the really fun stuff that just screams out, this is metal. Now another thing. How is it about if we did something like this? I actually took some of the same colors that were in the banner here. Some of that burnt sienna style color here. And I'm just going to put a little bit of that right onto his, or whatever that piece of armor would be called. And I do apologize that I meant to look up what some of these armor pieces were, do the Googles, find the armor, know what they were, so I could just say it instead of just kind of going, well, it's the shoulder thing, or it's this thing. I really want to have more of a accurate terminology than that. Someday I will. Just in time for me probably to not be painting knights for a while or anything that has that sort of armor for a little while, so then I could forget again. Now we're gonna get some of our, again, that's the faded ultimate, some of the clear blue, just to have a reflection there. I'm thinking right over here. So we've got this, all this stuff going on with the banner here. That needs to actually, can you see? Good, you can, yes, you can see it. There's actually some lines right there, and I thought, oh, let's have that reflect on not just that, but also a couple of those into the shadows there. Some of it here on his helmet. Even here on the top of the helmet over here, so that blue reflecting from the banner down onto his armor. Here's my blue, my darker blue there. Let's see. It's weird to be able to see that kind of, there's that ridge line there where this was 3D printed, and it's really funky to see that on something, say like a Forge World figure. And so that basically threw it down almost like it's a bit of a glaze. And see how we pulled that around. I'm just thinking maybe, again, a suggestion of that being reflected there. And now I'm going to think about the edges here of the face guards on his helmet. Some reflections here, some highlights there. What about here again on the golds? Couple of highlights there. So we're starting to really develop what's going on here with their armor. Starting to think, okay, again, the same linear type things happening because of maybe the sword reflecting. Maybe a bit of that sword reflecting onto these parts of his armor. And back to the lighter tone right here. Have to be willing to make all these crazy little shapes in your metals. I know it's tempting to just, and it's because it's what I used to do is, and not all that long ago, was just kind of shade this to make, okay, it's shaded light to dark and all that, which is great, but that's not what metal is. If it was just, say, painted armor or whatever, let's say it's the typical space marine type of thing, but it's just it's not the bare metal, but it's metal that's actually obviously been painted in some way, whether it's green or yellow or whatever. There's one type of shading for that, but when you want to have the metals, you got to introduce all these crazy, wacky colors. It's kind of par for the course. See, we got that light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light that's happening there. Again, finding some lights there. Now here it is somewhat in shadow, so got to think about that. Let's see, what do we got here? Yeah, this one's going to be interesting because of the way the sword, where the sword is pointed and such. But actually what we're going to have to do, oh, I see it is basically time to end this particular segment. Again, they can only be so long. Found that out the hard way. So we'll just pick this right up again in just a second. Also going to move that camera around so that I stop smashing into it. So we'll be right back with that in just a second. Let's continue on with this guy right here, and that's going to be saying this area. Now again, I thought about adding something that's just not blue down in here, but I think I'm going to do is go with an even darker blue down in here. Settle that issue. Then we also have to figure out, okay, let's get back into some of our purple over here. Right down in here again, getting some of the reflected light that's going to be here, or should be here. Let's work on our flip side of these head crests over here, but they're also going to have to be reflected into his helmet right here. It's a little bit difficult just to reach and get in there, that's for sure. Now let's see what we can do with our mint green. We'll combine that with some of our clear blue over here. Essentially a sky tone there. And we'll get a little bit of, again, sky tone up here. We're going to try and reflect some armor down here. Let's get a little bit more reflectivity in that helmet there. It's just, there's indications of maybe it's reflecting something, but not quite enough. We need some more. We also need some more of that sky blue up here. And then, just want to make sure you can see it. Now I do have my very bright light on just so that I can see some of this. It was too difficult for me to see what was going on in some cases here. There we are. Again, a couple of these brighter indications. Got these wings over here. So what we want to do is move on to, we want to do one of our cavalry guys here and basically show sort of like what's happening here. Our infantry. Now we need to get some darks here on our sword hilt. Now I'm going to get some of the brown liner out here. There we are. We'll mix that with some of our orange. That's going to go things like the sword hilt here. Also on the head crest, as I was working on this, I saw, oh, okay, I've got some of the lighter stuff there, but I don't have any real darks. We also need to think about the top of that shield there. Again, this is just a brownish orange here. We also need to think about, we're going to reflect that blue onto this gold a little bit here. We need to do that, and onto his arm, and onto the armor, and then back to some of our purple over here. I'm going to just touch of the blue into that. And we cut these shapes into smaller shapes. And you can see what that does. Here, let's get some, there we go, on these wings. Make those look a little bit more like the other side. We also need to, like we've done before in so many other places here, on those raised armor pieces, get some kind of an indication, that there is reflected light. Let's take our, get our mint green here. I also have to realize with something like this pad on the knee here, that there's parts of it that are pointed towards the ground. It's not, this whole side is not pointed up towards the sky. It's just this one portion of that side, if that makes any sense. I will bring out a couple more bits of the chainmail. Let's get some. I'm gonna actually see if I can't find. Actually, here. This is gonna be straight. Now that's their faded plum. I'm looking for. Aha! Here it is. This is just clear purple. It was over here. I saw all of a sudden there was no more. So grab a bit of that. There we go. That is going to help for some of those golds right there, and also I just want to get some of that into these areas right in here. See that? Boom, there, there. Areas where there should be some reflected light, just to, it creates so much more shape, so that when you do something like these final little highlights like that, they look like they're part of a whole. We certainly want to get a couple, again, some brighter indications there. Okay. Same thing over here. Focusing mostly on his, and then trying to get away from these areas that should be in shadow, because there's the cloak over those, and just to where he is, his whole body is kind of directed. It's all about light management. So with what we've got remaining here, let's see one of our horses here. Got my blue liner and brown liner to restore a few darks in here. There we go. Now I get the plastic ones sculpted differently from those from the Forge World versions. I'm going to get a touch of the darker tones in a few places here. Also, have to think about getting some green into here on the golds. But see how that's just a little bit of that clear green. It's just a little bit of it. It's very, well, it's very subtle. It's watered down. I'm putting it in some of the armor here too. Even up here, just again to have some different colors, going on here. Let's get some of our back to our mint green here. Let's start to bring out some of these edges, especially basically the edge that's closest to us. That's what we're doing there. Maybe even an indication of a horizon line here. I'm going to have to go back in with my darker brown as well to reinforce that notion of a horizon line there. I'm going to see if I can reach my, yes, I can get down in here. Get a little light on that side. Now I'm going to go back into this purple here because it's sort of a glaze. It's pretty watery. Back to my darker brown here again. We're also reinforcing some parts, just the horse's head in general. Things like the reins here. And some of this stuff starts to show up when I have my full range of lights on. And I've mentioned it several times, but I guess maybe it's something to talk about now. It's light matters. And it's just a very basic magnifier light. There is nothing at all fancy about this light. You can get them on Amazon office supply stores. It's just an LED magnifier light, and it makes such a tremendous difference eye strain wise. Just I couldn't really paint without them. They are that important to me. So, and I know people talk about eye strain. They also talk about I could never see that, whatever thing that you're working on. And well, I could never see it either if it wasn't for my magnifier lights. Now, remember I talked about brown liner here to create a little bit of a sky earth, a little indication of that. On his saddle here, I'm just going to get some darks going into that. Okay. Back to our mint green over here. I'm going to do the steel portions, I suppose you would say, of the horse's helmet. Like you do. So in the fifth and final episode, there's a lot of these elements we're going to have to tie in together. Whatever skin tones, hair tones, some of the horses for the freehand, kind of given the final indications of that. So this is going to be probably one of the more complicated, what would you say, fifth episodes where there's a lot of different things we're going to have to work on at the same. Usually it's finishing up one or two main type element. This one's there's going to be a lot of different things to tie together. See, even here, just going to indicate we got light on the top edge of the lance because it is basically pointed straight up in the air. We'll still do things on the metals too where need be. Because sometimes you make a little alteration somewhere and then you say, okay, now I need to get back into this, maybe make this lighter, darker. But in any case, I would say for sure, just with what we're going to end up as far as the end of this episode 4, I think an awful lot of folks they would be okay, just please playing a couple of games with it in this state before they could get to that fifth and final episode. I think we've gotten quite a lot of progress on some pretty complex metals. It's not just the infantry. There's the cavalry here, and we're trying to make them kind of work together so that they look like they all belong not just to the same unit, but can possibly be the same guy, just mounted in one area and then on foot as well. Back in my purple, can you? I think you can see it. I think you can. So I'm gonna put this here because you've seen me do the magenta thing so many times, and I'm gonna get a touch of red in here. We have a couple of these belts here, and a lot of this stuff in the final episode. That is what we're really gonna focus on. Even here, like on the shield, lighten up the wings on that freehand there. Obviously, work on this guy's face. There's so many little things. And again, normally I would just be working on those, but I try to break this into portions as best as I can for you. Again, it's not always possible. So here's some of our trying to work back into this with something that's along the lines of orange. Let's do some on our shield over here too. That just gives it a little bit of warmth, a little bit of intensity. Let's start to lighten up more of the. See if we can find some highlights here too. And then also the reflected light, that's important. And then too, that this, okay, maybe it's lighter, but instead of a lighter bluish color, this is where we're getting a little bit of that pink. What is happening on this side? We need to get some of our brighter highlights on the upper reaches of the helmet here. Over his eye, it starts to make the eye settle back in place. A couple indications of highlights there. We got on the rider's knee right here, on the stirrups, sword hilts, handles, wings. Can you see? Yeah, I think you can see that. And yeah, so I've got the brighter lights on, but I really just needed to be able to see some of this stuff. Also, there is definitely a struggle against some of the lack of details here, which is not unexpected for these. I mean, these are some old plastic kits. And we're trying to basically make 3 different eras of kits work together in the same army. Now, maybe that's probably not what a lot of you will have to necessarily deal with, because you're probably going to be playing systems that, I don't want to say they're newer, but the miniatures in them, a figure from 15, 16, 17, 18 years ago will just be so non-valid that it wouldn't really be part of your army anyway. That's a little bit different here with Lord of the Rings. because some of the very first figures are still an integral part of the game. And that kind of changes things a little bit. And while it's great to have newer sculpts and all that other type of stuff, when you've now got to blend those all together into a cohesive army, that becomes a challenge. And like I said, I don't want this episode to be 3 hours long, so I'll work for a few more minutes here on this guy. We can, like I said, we're going to be working some more, probably doing more things on the armor, but I also need to know, well, like just the reins here. This is also going to have to be painted in. The swan there. What happens with the freehand? How light does that get? How close to white do I go? Do I add little secondary lines here, like up here on the banner? How much does that change what's going to happen with the metal up here? That's why we don't want to encourage just doing things in isolation. We want to always be working on all points of this at the same time. Now here I've got plenty of light on the other side of that. Now we're going to take this the other way. We've got some of our blue liner. Think of it as basically a shadow or some kind of reflection cast of his arm here. That's on his chest there. How's about a little, yeah. A little bit of our lighter blue in there. Let's get some more little indications of additional lights in here. Then we can go in with maybe something that's a little bit darker. Sometimes the detail, like right there, I'm almost drawing that back in a bit. I want to try and get a smooth, there we go. I need to smooth out some of what I just put right in there. I want to get some of my clear blue, just indicate a little bit of that up here. Let's lighten it up a touch. I'm going to hopefully get that a little more squared off. That's good. Now, oh yeah, let's get some dark here. And then, once again, reflected light somehow in here. Can you see? I don't think you can see that. But this as we conclude here for episode 4. As always, I want to say thanks to everybody who has helped support this. And if you are seeing this at the time where things have gotten even crazier than they were, I hope that everybody is doing all right and not having to deal with too many additional crazy things. And hopefully maybe by the time you're watching these things, maybe you haven't gotten to them right away, everything is maybe a little bit more calm. But as always, thanks again, everybody. Thanks again. None of this would be possible without your support, so that is always going to mean a lot. That helps me to basically try out new stuff, learn new things all the time, and even stuff that I'm doing here, I've had to adopt some, maybe not new techniques, but had to think a little bit differently, even about the way I was doing the metal here. Just to you have some unusual shapes on these guys, and I have to kind of change the way, even the way I was approaching, the armor on the chest there. If I only painted Song of Ice and Fire miniatures, well, okay, then I would probably have a method that works all the time. If all I ever painted was Lannisters, but I've got to do more than just that, and that's pretty much going to be the same case for all of you folks too. Hopefully this makes you a little bit more willing to give the non-metallic metals a try. Now, I probably won't be doing any of the Lord of the Rings figures in true metallic metals, just because all these guys are going to be out on the battlefield together, so they need to match. Which means that I will be sticking with the non-metallic stuff, at least on the Lord of the Ring. Now, maybe there could be some specialty figures or something like that once in a while that I don't think I'll be using in a game. Here, let's reinforce his wings just a touch there. Okay. And I'm looking forward to making this freehand pattern lighter also in the next episode too. Like I said, we'll bring out these symbols, do faces, so it's going to be a whole lot of odds and ends that we're going to tie together in episode 5. So I will see you then, and thank you very much.